I just figured it was a natural ability. I've later realized that it's an energy signature that I give off that engages people. But that saved my life, because I went from feeling bad about myself, being in intense pain, only able to focus on the pain, to holy shit, these children have got scoliosis, they've got limbs being removed, they've got cancers. At least I chose to be on the bike. They didn't choose this. And it gave me a real sense of humble pie.
Welcome to Self Heal with Dr. Irene, where you'll learn powerful tools from world-class experts to heal yourself in all areas of your life: your health and energy, relationships, career, finances, and more. Welcome to Self Heal with Dr. Irene. And today, my guest is probably a bit different than other expert guests that I've had. And I was still so jazzed to have him on, and I know you'll realize why I invited him after you get to hear him. So Jonathan MacDonald is the founder of Potency.world, whose mission is to unleash 500,000 young neurodivergent women within 10 years. We'll learn more about that in a bit. He is also author of the book, Children Are Spectacular. Why are more adults? And he has taught his principles of recombinant innovation to both children and corporations alike to manifest their true potentials. So welcome, Jonathan. So happy to have you here.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Oh, it was totally my pleasure. Now, Jonathan, I already know this is going to be part one of a series. And so keeping that in mind, one of the first things that I really want our listeners to glean from this is how much adversity you've had in your life and how you have overcome it. Because that truly is the number one thing that everyone needs to self-heal is when we're faced with adversity, those life curveballs that can totally throw you for a loop, how to overcome and become better for it. So could you please explain, give us a little
brief history? Well, I think the first thing that so it's only on reflection as I wrote that book that I realized some of the things that are true about me. So I was, my birth mother's Nigerian. In Nigeria and lots of countries, women are married off early, and she was brought to the UK by the husband, who was then a womanizer and a serial cheater and all the rest of it. So she met the person who's my father, who she doesn't know and I don't know. And because I'm this lighter shade of brown, her husband was black, proper black, and she's my sort of color. So I pop out and he's like, what the hell's that about? Give up this baby or I'm going to leave you on the streets of London destitute. So she was forced to give me up on day 2. And I then was adopted in month 9, which is really good because if a child gets above 5, they typically don't get adopted because people want babies, not formed adults. And it turned out that, so my mum, when I say my mum and my auntie, I'm talking about the people that raised me. My mum always used to say to me, I was a fast runner in primary school, and she'd go, oh, you're such a good runner. Your legs were like jelly when we got you home from the orphanage or the children's home, or whatever it is. And I'm thinking for years and years and years, I go, well, yeah, babies' legs are like jelly. But I only found out last year from my dad that when they said like jelly, my legs didn't work. Basically, I hadn't been picked up lying, I don't know how many cots there are in a room, but lying in a cot, staring at the ceiling with no or very little human interaction, certainly not allowed to crawl around or be bobbed or stuff like that. And it took a year with a specialist OT to get my legs to work. So on reflection, and this could be perceived as sad by some people, but on reflection, I understand now how my mind works. When I'm here with you, you're here. As soon as you go, you pretty much cease to exist. And then what happens is I spool up people's stories when and if I meet them, rather than having a catalogue of internal thoughts. And whilst that presents problems trying to make a relationship, because I don't give off the vibe, nor do I engage in the behaviors which would normally be involved in courting. I can't be bothered with it because I think, well, you're probably not going to hang around, so what's the point? So that is an element of self-sufficiency. That so there's a study that says that babies, if they're left to cry, there's this whole thing about should you leave your babies to cry or should you go and cuddle them or what have you. Apparently, if a baby is left to cry for more than 3 days, it's an evolutionary safety mechanism that we stop crying. Because if you're out in the wild, you become a victim for predators, lions, whatever it might be. So these days, I will cry at the most stupid things, Toy Story 3, Tangled, all sorts of things, but I hardly ever. In fact, I only cried twice for myself as an adult. So that aspect, I think, built in some self-resilience, and also it's the extent of no one's going to help you, so you better go on and do it. There's no point moaning about it. There's no point crying about it. If you don't like it, change it. So I've been that way before I acquired the skills which in later life enabled me to do what I do now. So that's the adoption part. Basically a relatively unscathed youth, couple of minor injuries, scraped skin, things like that, but nothing serious. And then at 21, my friends at the time were bikers, and at 21 I went for a job with, I don't know if you remember Yellow Pages, those big thick directory things. Mm-hmm. So I went for a job with them, and I was 21 at the time, and their average age salesperson was 40. They had to have children and a mortgage to drive them to sell more. And I got this job. Basically, the HR director or HR person had turned me down. I'd received a letter of refusal, and so I tracked down the area manager where I was going to work, turned up on his door and said, listen, your HR department's turned me down, I think you should see me. He then made me do 4 second interviews. And at the time, I'm bald now, obviously, but at the time I had long hair and a ponytail. And the last meeting was, well, we can't have someone with long hair going out and seeing customers. I said, listen, give me the job, I'll cut my hair. And they gave me the job, I cut my hair. So I then moved into a world where I was earning a lot of money, not a lot of money, but a fair chunk for a 21-year-old. Went out and bought these bikes. I've had 2 Honda VFRs, like sports tourers, drove over France and Spain on my own on one of those. And then I bought this bike called a Fireblade. It's a Honda CBR 900cc motorcycle. At the time, it was the fastest production bike in the world. And oh my God. I mean, I did 12,000 miles without ever anything happening untoward. And then I had a pillion passenger on once, and I went to pull away and the front wheel rose up, and I went, ooh, and it wasn't frightening because it was quite smooth. I went, oh, this is quite a nice feeling. So from that moment onwards, I was pulling these ridiculous power wheelies everywhere I went, because like, it's just, you just go and it goes, and it just lifts up, and it's, well, it's funny to me, but if you Google sensory deprivation in babies, I am everything that they say happens if you don't get a human connection. So addictive personality, hypersensitive, very compulsive. I'm the kind of guy that turns all these tins around in the fridge or in the cupboard, that sort of thing. So I had this bike doing massive power wheelies. I had an illegal exhaust pipe, an illegal crash helmet, visor, everything, like literally just, I mean, so in America, you can't filter between traffic. But in the UK, so there's a motorway called the M25, say 3 lanes of traffic, and at rush hour time, it's stationary, and I would filter through that in second gear.
Filter means going.
But so you got a car here, not weave, but the space between 2 lanes of traffic.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and I would, as I say, filter is a generous term. I would filter at 100 miles an hour in second gear, screaming, going ah, flashing my lights. Now, a car would only have to have moved slightly. I'd have been dead straight away. Straight away, and I didn't even give it a moment's thought. I just didn't care. It was it's like a
Risk-taking behavior.
risk taking, and like, I'm here, you better get out of the way. So if anyone was going to have an accident on a bike, it was me. I would deserve to have an accident. And then, irony of ironies, I'm driving along within the speed limit on a straight road on a sunny day with my headlights on. I see a car starting to pull out or start approaching the junction in front of me. I'm on the main road, it's on a side road, and the skid mark from where I started braking was 11.6 meters from the impact, and I was doing 50. And that
Kilometers.
miles per hour.
Miles?
So
Okay,
yeah,
just checking.
70-ish. Yeah, 70-ish. The reaction, the seeing it reacting happened in less than half a second. But I've got I don't know, like iMovie is 35 frames a second. I've probably got 200 frames per second detailed. So that moment where it goes still or slow as you approach an accident, when your senses suddenly turn towards a threat, it just goes. And in that half a second, I tried to turn one way. Then the driver turned around, saw me, sped up, and blocked my exit the other way. So I ended up going in through the driver's window. This is my right side. I snapped I've got a scar down the back of my arm. I don't know if you can, now you won't be able to see it, but I've got a scar down the back of my arm. So I've punched in through the driver's window. The arm snapped in two, ripped the artery out. The skin and the rest of my arm has punched a hole in the back window of the car. And at the same time, my body's tumbling over it. So I died straight away on impact, like bang, lights out. I was lucky because one of the cars behind was a paramedic, and he administered CPR on me until the ambulance and the fire service could get there. I became conscious lying on the road about 20 meters away from the impact, and as I became conscious, I rolled my head over and I see all these bits of my bike, and I said, "Oh, my bike," because, grasping basically. And So I'm told, I don't remember it, but I'm told that blood pumps up like sort of 12 foot in the air if you bust an artery, and I basically ran out of blood, like not completely, but I died again. And funny story actually, when they use those defibrillators in hospitals, they put a plastic sheet between the machine and you. When you're bleeding out on the roadside, they just go bang. And I woke up in the hospital with 2 rings in my chest hair where it singed my chest hair. So basically, it's called a brachial plexus. You will be able to see this scar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what happens is, because you're leading forward with your dominant arm, it pulls all of the impact, pulls all of the nerves out of the spinal column. So if you can imagine, you don't have to imagine. So we've all had toothache. Toothache is one nerve exposed to the air. Every single nerve for my upper right side, including my right side lung doesn't work, my back shoulder. The only thing I can do is I can lift that shoulder a little bit, and it is so incredibly painful. So I spent 6 years. You took the opioid crisis in America. This is back in '96. I was taking so much morphine at one point in the first 6 years after the accident that it would easily have killed 3 horses. Just stupid amounts of it. I mean, we're talking thousands of milligrams a day. And I was in so much pain, even with that I was drinking and I was smoking joints and I was taking any drug I could get just to get away from it, because it's like, so I describe it in the book, but it's like having white hot needles pushed slowly into your eyes until they touch the back of your retinas, and it's just like, Now, we've spoken a few times, but as a rule, when I'm functioning, I use techniques of my mind to distract myself. But when I go to bed at night, it's the only thing there. So I've not slept for 26 years. I've been rendered unconscious by medication, but I've never slept. So I don't dream at night. I do all my dreaming during the day, which apparently is called lucid dreaming, which is, an interesting outcome. But essentially, after 6 years of trying to kill myself, because along with the recklessness with drugs and alcohol, I was driving around in this state, and I was driving around with my friends, playing loud music at really high speeds. And I suppose it's maybe an indication of how much pain I was in that nothing cut through. I could be sitting there shaking at the corner from taking too many, whatever it was, and still be in pain. I was vomiting because when the lung presses on the stomach, I was vomiting projectile vomit probably 8 or 10 times a day. And frankly, I'm quite disappointed that I'm not thinner, but there you go. So that was that. And in fact, the thing that saved me was, number one, the realization that nothing I took was making a difference. But number two, I was sitting in the hospital orthotics department to get various devices and stuff like that. Saw a poster on the wall, volunteer for the hospital radio. In hospitals in the UK, most of them have a group of volunteers that volunteer for the hospital radio, which is internal for the hospital, and you go and visit the patients, take a request for a song, and then go back to the studio and play this song. So I joined this hospital radio company, and blessed volunteers. They're great people, but it's amazing to me how timid, I suppose, people are. So I started hanging out with this guy called Graham, who did the adolescent ward. So we're talking children from, I think the youngest was 4, from 4 to 18. And he'd been working at this radio station for as long as I'd been alive. And the technology at the time, do you remember the old headphones you used to get on airplanes, which were just hollow tubes you'd put your ears in, and the music was generated in the seat, and then you had an air. So that was the way the earphones were in the hospital. And I'm going there and I'm going, you're not talking to the children. You're not engaging the children. So basically, as I want to do, I took over, scripted this intro, chose this thundering, rumbling trance music for the intro, had a crowd sound effect, so it would go, and it was amazing fun. And every week I'd do so the premise of the competition, okay, there's so many things to unpack, but I'll just be brief. So yes. Number one, you speak to the child first. Number two, you introduce yourself. Number three, you tell them what they're missing. Number four, you talk to the parents. Number five, you do an invitation to a competition. So I'd have a bag of Maltesers and a bag of minstrels, different sweets, whatever, over there. And I go, do you want this or that? And they go, well, I like that. And I go, well, the competition tonight is, and it was always on the premise that I'd kidnapped an animal and was holding it hostage in the studio, and they could only release it if they phoned up and did the animal impression themselves. But if you want children to do something like that, you have to show them doing it. You can't be saying, do this. You have to go. So we had sheep in the sheets, we had wolf in the wold, we had the donkey on diamorphin, the elephant with an ECG, oh, and the monkey in the mirror. And yeah. So basically, this show was 9 o'clock till 10 o'clock on a Sunday night in a children's ward. And I was getting 12 phone calls from an 18-bed ward. And this radio station had never had phone calls. And it's just like, that is, I just figured it was a natural ability. I've later realized that it's an energy signature that I give off that engages people. But that saved my life, because I went from feeling bad about myself, being in intense pain, only able to focus on the pain, to holy shit, these children have got scoliosis, they've got limbs being removed, they've got cancers. At least I chose to be on the bike. They didn't choose this. And it gave me a real sense of humble pie. I'd also been to Goa for the millennium, and I'd seen real poverty, and the poverty where people are living in gutters in the streets, and those experiences and those children, by producing something that engaged them, it took a great deal of my time, which I was happy to do, and by projecting fun, they light up, and that lights me up. And so it's like the feelings that you get from taking drugs or whatever your poison is can be replaced by the way you interact with people, and that was fundamental to my survival and not dying at that stage. Later on, we've got 5 minutes left. Later on,
well, I want to interrupt,
please,
and unpack some things that you've said.
go on.
Right, and just want to back up to your adoption, and we'll deal with the other fun stuff later. I probably should have put a warning at the beginning of this that parental guidance advised, like with the goring.
Yeah,
like
possibly.
I'm geeking out going, oh cool, brachial plexus injury, huh? Or snap bones. Okay. But he's like, I get it that others might not. So we'll make sure that we put a written warning in the description for this.
The cover of my book has a parent advisory sticker on. So
there you go. And I just want to make the connection that your parents, your adoptive parents, can you give a little description of them? So I mean, flesh that out.
Sure. So basically a white British family. My mother used to be a photographer for Unilever, and then she had an industrial accident and went on to be a sort of youth worker. My dad was an apprentice for Rolls-Royce aircraft engines, and then went on to be a engineering and mathematics lecturer at a college. So my environment was, we had a dark room in our house for my mum to do photos at home. So, all the chemicals, the way you used to do photos. So I've come from an environment which was white, middle class, books all around the house, reference books. As families, as a family, we never talked about some TV show or some irrelevant thing. We would talk about sociology or politics or religion or whatever it might be. So they were highly intelligent. They took a real risk to adopt a mixed race child in the 70s. And I didn't appreciate that until much later in life, the risks they'd taken, because I was literally one of only two black children, or the other guy was blacker than me, in fact, but only two black children in my primary school. So at the time, it was like being a raisin in a bowl of rice pudding. That's them, basically.
Awesome. And I'm going to leave that part there because we're going to talk more about that in part 2 interview. And then I want to fast forward and just really emphasize that you really had a death wish. Lovingly call a spade a spade.
Yep. No, definite death wish.
Right. And then when you essentially got what you wished for, almost, because some dang people interrupted and kept bringing you back, right, then you had to live with the consequences of that. And even then you had the death wish. In other words, it's like, well, I didn't succeed one time, and I'm saying this is conscious. In other words, this is, I'm sure.
No, it was pretty conscious. No, it was conscious.
Was it conscious that you really wanted to die?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even today, I wear dog tags that say do not resuscitate. So I am really aware that life is transient, and I don't waste any day. I know that every day, because I've been dead several times now, walked out the door one day and one morning and not come back that evening, I really get it. So I will always go for it, basically.
Well, and the distinction is that now you're appreciating life while you have it.
Yes.
And that happened, the trigger was when you looked outside of yourself and your pain and agony, that was your whole existence, and you saw others suffering more, and you decided to give back and to contribute.
Yeah, it's just, in relation to other people's suffering, I don't think that what I suffer is bad. I'm not starving, I'm not stupid, I've got a house, I've not been, a victim of sexual violence or something like that. So really, although the pain is a physical and visceral feeling, at least I know what it's from.
Exactly. And I just wanted to highlight that, because that was, and we haven't even finished.
Not even started.
We haven't even, we haven't even scratched the surface, my listeners. I really want you to know that even though we're coming to the end of our time, and I just really wanted to wrap it up with that takeaway that, it can sound cliche that there is always somebody worse off than you. And I've been there where I call it kind of like that tunnel vision, or more like the cone of silence from Get Smart, right? Like,
Right.
But it's like, but you can't see beyond it.
No.
Right. In other words, it's like your whole existence is here. And I've been there. I understand. And how I got out of it was by focusing on the others, and really looking at, okay, I may have it bad, and that person and that person and that person have it way worse than I do. And what can I do to help? Right. It's the same way I got over, because I am neurophysiologically, I know you and I, and that's the other thing we'll talk about next time, is the neurodivergent. Neurologically or psychologically, is like when I did Psych 101 years ago, it was like I was in the 99th percentile as being introverted. That's the word.
Yep.
Introverted. And the way I rehabilitated myself and became what I call a learned extrovert is by taking myself, introverted literally means inward looking.
Yeah.
Right? Extrovert, outward looking. And how I changed that was, and you said the same thing before we hopped on air here, that your primary goal is to make every person's life better somehow.
Yeah.
That you interact with every moment, every day. And that is how I got over mine as well. That whether it was the public speaking, or whether it was, my own issues that I was working through, or just my painfully shy life, was that I decided and chose to focus on everyone else and how can I make this person's life better. So my mission is always, whether I'm in the checkout aisle or at a restaurant or with my clients or whatever, I always say that it's like, how can I make this person's life? In fact, my thing is I always want to get them to laugh.
Yeah, exactly the same. So I tell jokes, and they're appalling jokes.
Oh, they are. I've heard them.
Yeah, it's true, actually. But I just love it, because I tell them in the gym in the morning, and everyone goes, oh. But as long as I get a reaction from them, I know I'm changing their state. So yeah, laughter is important. And it's so nice to be nice.
It is. It is. And you can have fun and be nice too. Jonathan, thank you so much for being here for part 1.
Yes.
And I've deliberately left some things hanging, like, ooh, what is neurodivergent? And ooh, what is recombinative? You know how long it took me to say that? Recombinative innovation.
That's the one.
Yes. And so we're going to learn more about that next time, as well as, and the impacts that it has had on the people that you've worked with, and as well as what Potency.world is all about and what your mission is all about. So stay tuned, listeners, and that will be interview number 2. That'll be coming down the pipeline soon. So thank you so much for joining us, Jonathan.
Thank you for having me, and hi everyone. Take care. Actually, do you want a joke for the listeners?
Oh, please. Okay. Leave them with
a
joke that'll send them laughing.
Okay, so man goes into a bookshop. He goes up to the guy behind the desk and he says, "Excuse me, I'm looking for all your books on paranoid schizophrenia." And the guy goes, They're behind you. Is that right?
I thought you were going to tell the other bookstore joke, and I was just going.
I knew as I started that would be a concern, so I thought, yeah. And there, as a teaser, your viewers are going to go, "What's the other bookshop joke?" Oh dear, stop.
Yes, we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
What a wonderful way to leave this conversation. Take care.
See you next time. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to Self-Heal with Dr. Irene. Please head over to iTunes to subscribe and leave a review. By doing so, this will help us reach more people with our message. Be sure to visit www.selfheal.life to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our fantastic bonus content. And keep listening for more insights and tools to empower you to heal yourself and enjoy life to the max.